Let's begin by exploring the concept of primitive accumulation and how it's resurfacing in today's advanced capitalism. Traditionally, Marx described primitive accumulation as the violent separation of people from their means of production, paving the way for capitalist relations. But Saskia Sassen argues that we're witnessing a new phase. Advanced capitalism is deepening by destroying more traditional forms of capitalism, not just incorporating them. This transformation is marked by systemic expulsion. People are no longer valued as workers or consumers, but are pushed out to make way for high finance and resource extraction. The logic has shifted. Rather than expanding prosperous working and middle classes, today's capitalism is about maximizing extraction and profit, often at the expense of communities and traditional economies. This sets the stage for a brutal sorting of winners and losers, both globally and locally. Now let's look at two powerful mechanisms driving this transformation: debt regimes and land grabs. In many countries of the global south, imposed debt and debt servicing regimes have devastated traditional economies. Governments are forced to prioritize debt payments over essential services like health and education, leading to widespread poverty and weakened states. This opens the door for foreign investors and multinational corporations to acquire vast stretches of land for agriculture, mining, and water extraction. The land becomes more valuable to the global market than the people living on it. These acquisitions aren't just about extraction, they fundamentally reshape territories, turning them into resource sites rather than spaces for national development. Meanwhile, survival economies emerge, with migrants and remittances playing a crucial role in keeping households afloat. The systemic logic here is clear: traditional economies are dismantled to expand the operational space for advanced capitalism. Turning to the global north, the subprime mortgage crisis reveals another face of primitive accumulation. Financial innovation destroyed over 15 million U.S. households in just 2 years, leaving entire neighborhoods vacant and devastated. The crisis wasn't simply about irresponsible borrowing, it was fueled by a demand for asset-backed securities in a highly speculative financial market. Subprime mortgages became tools for extracting value from modest-income households, with little concern for their ability to pay. The financial sector bundled these mortgages into opaque investment products, spreading risk globally and triggering a crisis of confidence. This mechanism is likely to be replicated worldwide, targeting billions of middle-class households. The result is a brutal sorting. Advanced capitalism expands its operational space by expelling people and incorporating their assets, whether land or homes, into global capital circuits. The social consequences, inequality, displacement, and poverty, are profound and ongoing. Conclusion: the contemporary versions of primitive accumulation are reshaping both the global south and north. Debt regimes and land grabs expel people and transform territories, while financial innovations like subprime mortgages extract value from households and communities. The operational space for advanced capitalism expands, but at the cost of widespread displacement, poverty, and social fragmentation. Sassen's analysis urges us to look beyond simple extraction and recognize the deeper systemic transformation at play. The expulsion of people and the incorporation of terrain are not just economic events, they are system-changing practices that redefine the very logic of capitalism. As we move forward, understanding these dynamics is crucial for grasping the challenges and possibilities of our globalized world.
Ever wondered how contraception, often hailed as a gateway to women's liberation, has also been linked to deeply disturbing stories of exploitation and risk? Today's episode peels back the layers behind the science, the trials, and the politics of contraceptives.
That's a heavy question, and it goes far beyond what most people imagine. I'm here to dive into this with you. From secret testing in developing countries to FDA approval drama, we'll explore the real-life impact on women's bodies and lives.
We'll unpack the Norplant saga, investigate chemical sterilization, and probe controversial vaccine trials. Plus, we'll look at the power dynamics that shape who gets tested and why. Stay tuned for stories that challenge the mainstream narrative and for practical insights on ethical research.
So buckle up as we follow the journey from the 60s contraceptive revolution to modern-day controversies. We'll hear personal testimony, highlight systemic failures, and discuss what needs to change. Let's get started.
Let's start with Norplant, a contraceptive hailed as revolutionary. 6 tiny implants under the skin, 5 years of protection, no daily pills. Sounds ideal, right? But for women like Patsy Smith, the reality turned out to be a nightmare.
Absolutely, Patsy's experience really opened my eyes. After getting Norplant, she suffered intense headaches, blurred vision, and eventually blindness in one eye. The doctors were baffled at first, and only later found she had pseudotumor cerebri, a condition linked to increased brain fluid pressure crushing the optic nerve.
What's alarming is that Dr. Tang, her specialist, began seeing similar cases. Over 40 out of 100 referred women had blurred vision, 8 with the same diagnosis as Patsy. Yet there was no prior research connecting Norplant to these symptoms.
That actually makes you question the claims of thorough testing, doesn't it? Many women had no problems, but thousands ended up taking legal action. And we now know most trials were conducted in developing countries, where oversight was often minimal.
Bangladesh became a major site for Norplant trials, and the stories here are even more disturbing. Farida Akhtar uncovered how poor women were pressured into these trials without proper consent. Many couldn't get Norplant removed, even when their health was deteriorating.
Their accounts are pretty harrowing. Severe weakness, persistent bleeding, and the threat to family survival, all because they couldn't access removal. Some even sold their only assets, like cows, just to pay for treatment. And the clinics often refused to acknowledge or record their side effects.
It's shocking how informed consent was missing. Women didn't even know they were part of an experiment. Farida and her team had to work like detectives to gain trust and uncover the reality.
The systemic disregard for poor women's health was clear. Reports claimed Norplant was safe and acceptable, yet eyesight disorders and removal refusals went unmentioned. It's a classic case of science failing those it's supposed to protect.
Funny how the same pattern emerges in Haiti, another site for Norplant trials. Political chaos made good research almost impossible, and women faced extraordinary risks both from the contraceptive and the act of speaking out.
Exactly. Katherine Modernovska's undercover fieldwork revealed women suffering severe side effects: bleeding for months, headaches, exhaustion. Without access to basic supplies, these issues became life-altering. And local clinics often pressured women to stay in the trial, sometimes even resorting to physical force.
It's chilling how women were described as guinea pigs, with clinics resisting removal and dismissing suffering. All this while U.S. officials claimed ethical standards were met, and data shows over 100 women were refused removal out of just 1,300 in one trial.
Rose Ann Auguste called Cité Soleil a slum laboratory. This kind of exploitation isn't isolated, it's a global pattern, with similar abuses reported in Indonesia, Brazil, and beyond. The approval process back home? Rushed, with little attention to global reports of harm.
Besides Norplant, chemical sterilization methods like quinacrine have been pushed in developing countries. Promoted as simple, cheap, and effective, these methods often bypass regulatory approval and can cause immense suffering.
What's wild is quinacrine's history. It's distributed by just a couple of doctors, sometimes out of a basement, and has been used on over 80,000 women without major regulatory clearance. The method induces inflammation and scarring, but scientists warn it's imprecise and painful, echoing experiments from Nazi camps.
The funding is equally shady. Private foundations with anti-immigration agendas have backed these campaigns. The language used suggests a drive to control populations rather than empower women raising serious ethical questions.
Those behind the trials insist they're rescuing women from unwanted fertility, but critics argue the real issue is lack of proper health care and informed choice. The World Health Organization has called for a pause on quinacrine research until more is known, but that hasn't stopped its global spread.
Moving to the latest frontier contraceptive vaccines. In the Philippines, suspicions rose when women received repeated tetanus shots, which were allegedly laced with an anti-fertility hormone. Some reported miscarriages and fertility issues afterward.
What's unsettling is that lab tests on some vaccine vials came back positive for beta-HCG, the hormone linked to pregnancy suppression. The government denied contamination, but independent doctors and medical associations demanded further investigation.
If true, this would require deliberate action by manufacturers and authorities, a worrying prospect. Sister Mary Pilar Verzosa and Dr. Vilma Gonzaga both became outspoken, with Dr. Gonzaga even suing after suffering 2 miscarriages.
While science remains unresolved, the bigger picture is clear. Women have been lied to or denied agency about their bodies, whether through hormone doses, coercive trials, or secret sterilization. The consequences aren't just medical, they're deeply personal and societal.
Let's wrap up with 3 clear takeaways. First, the promise of contraceptives can mask serious risks, especially when ethical standards are ignored. Second, informed consent and transparency must be the backbone of any clinical trial. Third, systemic exploitation persists wherever oversight is weak and women's voices are silenced.
If you take away anything, it's this. Demand accountability from researchers and policymakers. Women everywhere deserve agency, accurate information, and respect for their health. Speak up, ask questions, and push for ethical science.
And here's one practical step, whether you're a healthcare worker, activist, or just curious. Support organizations that advocate for informed consent and ethical trials. Share these stories and help ensure women's health isn't sacrificed for convenience or profit.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you leave with new insight and the motivation to question, challenge, and change the systems shaping women's health worldwide. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.
Controversies in contraceptive trials in developing countries. 0725 714 2026. The documentary exposes the ethical issues surrounding the testing and use of contraceptives like Norplant and quinacrine in developing countries. It highlights severe side effects, lack of informed consent, coercion, and disregard for women's well-being, with women often denied removal of devices. U.S.-backed trials faced criticism for exploiting poor, vulnerable populations. The film also investigates claims of secret contraceptive vaccine trials and raises concerns over human rights and scientific integrity. BBC Television. Horizon. The Human Laboratory. Air date 5, November 1995. Narrator Charlotte Cornwell. The 60s, the age of contraception, heralded a whole new era of liberation for women. But contraceptives have not always meant liberation. SYBIL-SHAINWALD. They have been used as a human laboratory. They're just expendable. Who cares if a third-world woman dies? Narrator, when Norplant was released in the West recently, it seemed to be every woman's dream. Hassle-free sex, no daily pill, and extremely reliable protection. 6 implants are surgically inserted under the skin of the arm, where they stay for 5 years, releasing a hormone to inhibit ovulation. Its developers claimed it was the most widely studied contraceptive to arrive on the market, but some women have had problems. Patsy Smith had Norplant inserted after the birth of her second child. Patsy Smith. 3 months after having Norplant inserted, I started getting horrible headaches like gosh. It was like somebody was just grabbing my head and just squeezing it together as tight as can be squeezed, like someone had put a bomb in there, and it was going to go off. I'd noticed that being kind of blurry, and after the months, it got a little bit more blurry, and things started looking like they were on top of each other, and... Narrator, doctors thought there was nothing wrong at first, but over the next year her eyesight deteriorated. Her symptoms became unbearable, and she was taken to hospital. Patsy Smith. I knew something was wrong right away when residents and students and people started coming in and saying, "Can we look at your eyes? You know, can we take a look at your eyes?" They did all kinds of tests and pictures and x-rays and ultrasounds and odds and ends. And oh, I was scared. I was really, really scared. And then they tell me this big word and I'm like, whoa. I then asked if I would go blind, and Dr. Tang told me she couldn't make any promises, that she couldn't make me any guarantees at all. So we're just waiting. Narrator, they found Patsy had pseudotumor cerebri, a condition where increased fluid pressure in the brain crushes the optic nerve. The pale circle shows a cross-section through a normal nerve, but in Patsy's case, the fuzzy white circle shows where the nerve has been crushed and permanently damaged. Dr. Rosa Tang, Patsy has blindness in one eye already for practical purposes. What damage she has now is not going to improve. She is blind in that eye permanently and partially blind in the other. If she has another episode, this may further damage the vision she has left, and she could go completely blind. Narrator, could the Norplant have caused this? Dr. Tang became so concerned that she wrote to every eye specialist in Texas to find out if other women on Norplant had eyesight disorders. Out of 100 women referred to her, over 40 had blurred vision. Of these 8 had the same condition as Patsy. Rosa Tang. It was very surprising for me because I had not seen any reports in the literature at this time of such a link between Norplant and pseudotumor cerebri, and I was surprised of the fact that there were so many patients that seemed to be having the condition related to Norplant. I think that there is enough out there that there is a possibility of a link between the two, that a larger-scale study should be done if Norplant is to be continued. Patsy Smith. What hurts me the most is the possibility that I may go blind and not see my children grow up. It's really scary. It's more precious to me now than it was before. I take a lot of the things that she does and I hold them near so that way I can remember them if anything happened. Narrator, eyesight disorders, strokes, persistent bleeding, problems with removal. Many women have no such side effects, but thousands are now taking legal action in the West. Norplant was studied for 20 years in the West, but mostly in developing countries. After standard clinical trials of Norplant had been completed, pre-introductory clinical trials were held to assess the drug's safety, efficacy, and acceptability in local conditions. Horizon went to Bangladesh to investigate one such trial. In the mid-80s, stories had begun to emerge from women's health campaigns. In the slums of Dhaka, Farida Akhtar heard of women with Norplant in their arms who were desperate to get it removed. She realized she had stumbled on a drug trial. Farida Akhtar. This started with the slum woman very secretly. They just did not tell anybody. There was no announcement, and these are poor women. We are not meeting them every day, so nobody knew. Narrator, Farida Akhtar was concerned about the vulnerability of slum women and wanted to know how the tests were being run, but no one could tell her. Farida Akhtar. We found that the family planner would just come to them and say that you can't talk about these things to any outsider woman, and they were afraid to talk to us. You know. They were so afraid that sometimes they were not even sure that because we look educated women, we might be from the government, or from the family planning clinic itself. Maybe we are just pretending to know them, so they were not sure what they could tell us. You know, it took us time to even get their trust to be open, and they were so much afraid. You could see in their face that they were really afraid. Narrator, an earlier trial had been dropped because of public outcry over the way Norplant was being promoted as a safe drug when it was still under test. While Farida Akhtar was investigating this trial, her offices were raided by military government officials. Farida Akhtar. They just gave me an impression that if I don't answer questions in the right way, they will do something. It was like a frightening thing, you know. They entered the gate, asked where is the executive director, and you know. 2 men coming in, you know, and entered my room and sat down, and there was a file, and you can see the government file. You know, it's a red tape, and they have Ubanig written on it, you know. And they said, where do you get the money from? What are you doing, you know? They were just frightening me, asking me, look, you have the file, we have information about you. Narrator, undeterred, she continued her investigation. Farida Akhtar. I really had to find out in a detective way. We went to the villages, we went to the slum areas. It was more than 100 women we talked to. Narrator, she found the side effects were having a dramatic effect on their lives. Woman subtitled, suddenly my body became weak, quite suddenly. I couldn't get up, couldn't take care of my children, couldn't cook. I was bedridden. Woman subtitled, it was unbearable. Interviewer, did you feel weak? Woman, yes, my limbs felt like collapsing, as if they were being wrenched apart. I couldn't work or eat even. I had to lie in bed for 3 months. I couldn't do anything. Interviewer, and the bleeding. Woman, I was bleeding all the time. Farida Akhtar. Severe bleeding makes her so weak, and she even does not have 2 meals a day. Many of them fainted quite often, you know, which was not the case before. So these women were telling us we were supposed to be very happy after taking this Norplant, but why our life is like hell now. Narrator, then she heard of women being coerced to stay in the trial. Once Norplant is inserted, a woman cannot remove it by herself. Woman subtitled, I went to the clinic as often as twice a week, but they said, this thing we put in you costs 5,000 takas. We'll not remove it unless you pay this money. Of course, I feel very angry. I went to several other doctors and offered them money to take those things out, but they all refused. I went to 3 or 4 of them and they said these can only be taken out by those who put them in. They said that, if they tried, they might go to jail. Interviewer, if they ask you to take Norplant again, will you? Woman, that thing. Even if 14 generations of my ancestors asked me, I shall refuse. Interviewer subtitled, how many times did you go to the clinic and ask them to take it out? Woman, in 6 months about 12 times. Yes, about 12 times. I went to the clinic and pleaded, I'm having so many problems. I'm confined to bed most of the time. Please remove it. my health broke down completely. I was reduced to skin and bone. I had milk and eggs when I could. But that did me no good. Woman subtitled. I felt so bad, my body felt so weak. Even my husband told me it was all very inconvenient. Interviewer, how is your relationship with your husband? Woman, what else could it be? He says he'll get another wife tomorrow. I told the doctors, please take it out, I'm having so many problems. Interviewer, how many times did you ask to get it removed? Woman, oh, about 15 times. One day I was so desperate, I gave up hope. I felt like throwing myself under the wheels of a car. FARIDA AKHTER. One woman, when she begged to remove it, they said, I'm dying, please help me get it out. They said, okay, when you die you inform us, we'll get it out of your dead body. So this is the way they were treated. In a slum area, people are living in a very small, like 5 FT by 7 FT, where at least 5 family members are living and these women are working outside. The most important resource they have is their own healthy condition. Narrator, in Bangladesh, if a woman can't work, often her family can't eat. FARIDA AKHTER. We have many information where these women have told us that they have sold their cow or the goat, which was the only asset they had for treatment because she had to get well. Otherwise, the family can't survive. So in order to save her, they had to, sell the cow, or if they didn't want to treat her, then she suffered. So the family was suffering either way. In every sense, these people were totally torn. Their economic condition were torn. Their family happiness was totally gone. Narrator, by now, news of the Norplant testing had spread. Nasreen Huq, who has recently represented the Bangladeshi government on women's health issues, found more disturbing aspects to the trial. NASREN HUQ. Participation in a clinical trial requires that the person who is participating in that trial understands that it is a trial, that the drug they are testing out is still in experimental stages. This requires informed consent. This was categorically missing. Interviewer subtitled, when they implanted this device, did they say it was an experimental thing that they were testing? Women RSBUNDNG. No. Narrator, perhaps most worrying of all in the drug trial, potentially serious side effects appeared to have been ignored. NASREN HUQ. Many of them told us that they had problem with eyesight, which is not recorded by the clinics which were doing the trial on their bodies. Woman subtitled, I couldn't see. I couldn't look at things at a distance. I had trouble focusing. In the village we light oil lamps. I couldn't look at them. They looked like the sun, as red and large as the sun. If I looked into the distance, my eyes would water. Interviewer subtitled, what do you mean by this dimness of the eyes? Woman, if I went out of doors, my eyes became absolutely dark. I couldn't see anything at all, as if my eyes had become affected by blindness. Narrator, in 1993, a report of the first phase of this trial concluded. Norplant is a highly effective, safe, and acceptable method among Bangladeshi women. It stated less than 3% of women reported significant medical problems, no mention of eyesight disorders or women being refused removal. NASREN HUQ. I think the Norplant trials were bad science, really shoddy science, because they were not recording the side effects. They were scolding women when they wanted to report side effects. They were scolding women if they came in at a time when they were not scheduled to come in for a follow-up check. Their request for removal were disregarded, were not even recorded during the trial. So how can they tell us that it was an acceptable method for women and that this has been scientifically tested out, When continuation rates reflect caution, reflect refusal to remove, reflect disregard of women's concerns, reflect disregard for women's health, how can they even accept that this has been the work of scientists? FARIDA AKHTER. If you look at the trial, it looks like as if this woman are no better than a guinea pig, and a guinea pig perhaps is more expensive in the West. That's why our women are cheaper here. So they're easily available. They can be easily controlled, and their bodies can be easily tested. NASREN HUQ. When you conduct a trial in this sort of setting, you are simply taking advantage of them being poor. You've access, cheap access, to subjects, and you can write it up as a successful trial. You're not in any way advancing science. You're taking advantage of a situation in which women are poor and they don't want to have more children. And by providing this method, or conducting this trial, you are not in any way letting them out of their desperate situation. I mean, I have been trained in science and I'm sorry. This is not science. Narrator. The trials were developed with funds from the U.S. Agency for International Development. Dr. NILSDAULAI. We have very strict rules at AID in terms of any experimentation that's done that certain ethical standards in terms of human subjects have to be met, and informed consent is a critical part of that. I've not been made personally aware of any serious lapses in terms of informed consent of any of the AID trials. If there are cases where women were not accorded the opportunity to have Norplant removed, that would be a very serious breach, and if this was done with U.S. aid funds, we would take that extremely seriously. Interviewer. Well, it has been done with U.S. funds, it appears, and we have interviewed many women who had problems getting it removed. How can this be with a clinical trial which you're running with American taxpayers' money? NILSDAULAI. Well, I can't answer that specific clinical trial because that's one that I'm not personally familiar with. I can't tell you how it can be. I can tell you that if it is, there will be severe consequences. The organizations that would be responsible for monitoring and overseeing these would have to clarify how any such activities took place under their oversight. Narrator. Family Health International oversaw some of the trial for USAID. They confirmed their officials were in Bangladesh regularly, but told Horizon, "We do not believe this was very poor science." The study was well designed and implemented in an ethical way. They admitted there were problems with removal, but say they acted upon them and that these were not as widespread as claimed. Yet their own data reveals that out of 1,300 women from the expanded trial, over 100 reported being refused removal. And Horizon found evidence of problems with other USAID studies of Norplant. Testing was also carried out in Cité Soleil in Haiti, the poorest community in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Since the mid-'80s, there have been 14 coups d'état and 8 changes of government. CATHERINE, MATRNOWSKA. Danger's a difficult concept to define in Haiti. It can come from any direction at any moment. People who stand up and indicate that they have been abused are often punished, attacked at night, raped. Hundreds of women in Cité Soleil have been raped by the paramilitary forces. Often entire neighborhoods are razed and burned down. This political instability makes the climate for doing good research absolutely impossible. For many years now, I've had copious field notes on side effects with the Norplant method, but I've had to work essentially in secret and covertly with Haitian women listening to their stories and their difficulties, and unable to publish it. The participants in my study could have been in grave danger had the information been let out. The fact that they were talking to me about their woes, about their difficulties with the Family Planning Center and the Norplant method. Many of the women that I interview come from the countryside where they've lost their land, where they've lost their income, where they've basically taken off in search of life, and within months most of them tell me. The little saying, French, takes a turn and they say French, which means in searching for life the essence of life is destroyed. They can't find food, they can't find water, they have no access to health care, so essentially they're looking for life but they find misery. Narrator. It was while studying this community that Catherine Maternoska came across USAID trials of Norplant and was worried at what she found. CATHERINE, MATRNOWSKA. Side effects in the context of Haitian women's lives are horrible. With the Norplant users, they were extremely severe. Bleeding could go on for 18 months, and what this means in a Haitian woman's life has enormous impact. In Haiti, women don't have Codex or tampons. That means that they have to use rags. She needs to wash them every morning. Washing is not a simple task at all in Haiti. She has to buy soap, which cuts into her finances for her food, to purchase water. A woman who can't actually purchase the water needs to find the water in the nearby gutters, which are filthy, polluted, and used for defecation, among other things. Another bad side effect was headaches. A Haitian woman is not able to buy aspirin. They live in very noisy, active, polluted, intense communities, and the headaches on top of all this were intolerable. Many women collapsed from this method in sheer exhaustion. They couldn't go to work. They felt so ill, they were unable to function. Narrator, just as in Bangladesh, a pattern emerged where it was sometimes difficult for the women to get the Norplant removed. Catherine Maternoska believed local clinics were under pressure to keep women in the trial to make the data look good. CATHRNE, MATRNOWSKA. One woman came in with an infection in her arm. She was a market woman. She carried heavy loads on her head, and when she came in asking to get the insert out, the doctor complained, and he looked at me, and he was used to having me in the clinic, and he said, "Oh, Kathy, look at this woman. She's an animal. She wants her Norplant out. She's an animal. She has to be in the study, and she wants it out now. What's her problem?" They proceeded to throw her literally onto the table, lie her down so that they could take the Norplant insertion out. They threw her head to the side like this, and they gave her the anesthesia. But before the anesthesia had actually taken effect in her skin, they started pulling the inserts out and making incisions and pulling the inserts out. Because the infection in her arm, it looked painful. It was red, it was swollen, and the muscle and sinew tissue had grown over the implants. They were pulling and she was wailing. She was why, and they continued calling her an animal. I think it's a sham, it's disgusting. It appalled me that this kind of research was going on. When someone's looking for help, looking for a solution to their poverty, and what they find is something that just makes their poverty worse, it's a huge, huge sadness. Narrator. For health workers in Sete Solil Norplant is one of a long line of contraceptives that have been tested in Haiti over several decades. Roseanne Augusde subtitled, "It is important for us to expose how women in poor countries are used as guinea pigs, especially in Haiti, so that they can test their products. Developed countries may not even use these products because the hormone levels are too high, but they use these in experiments on women in poor countries so that they can regulate the levels. Fundamentally, what appears to us in Haiti is that these people have found a laboratory here, a slum laboratory, to do whatever they want. And one of the biggest laboratories for the American government is right here in Sete Solil." Interviewer. Why would your research target the poorest and the most illiterate and the least well able to defend themselves group? NILSDAULAI. You'll find that the broad portfolio of research does not target the poorest and the most illiterate and the least able to defend themselves. That in fact the research that's carried out is over a broad spectrum of society because it's important to understand the use effectiveness and the benefits, as well as the disadvantages of certain contraceptive types among a wide variety of groups. Interviewer. That may be true for USAID as a whole, but I am talking about the clinical trials of Norplant in the Third World, which were in the slums of Dhaka. Narrator. At this point, the interview was terminated by a State Department official who asked for further information. Later, Horizon was told, USAID categorically denies that poor Haitian women were being used as human guinea pigs by the United States. They added they were proud of their program in Sete Solil and that the clinic there had been widely praised for its quality of care. Norplant was studied in over 40 countries and apart from Bangladesh. There are reports of problems from Indonesia, Brazil, and others. So how did the drug get approved by America's Food and Drug Administration? Sybil Shainwold attended the only public hearing in 1989. SYBIL, SHANWLD. The FDA approve a process in the case of Norplant was ludicrous. It was not the standard approval process. The auditorium was packed, and it was like a dog and pony show. There were blonde women running around saying, "I love Norplant. I'm satisfied with Norplant." On the other hand, the advisory committee, which was hearing the testimony, took very little cognizance of the fact that there were problems that had been reported throughout the world. Narrator. This application was later withdrawn due to problems with the data. It was resubmitted and approved 8 months later with no further public hearing. SYBIL, SHAINWALD. This was the fastest approval process that I know of since I have been dealing with the Food and Drug Administration, and the purpose was to market this overseas to control population. Narrator. Many researchers do believe that Norplant is of great benefit, but others are critical of the U.S. government's promotion of a long-acting contraceptive overseas. Prof. BETSYHARTMNN. At the highest levels in Washington, population growth in the Third World has long been perceived as a national security threat. During the Cold War, of course, public fear and paranoia often focused on the nuclear bomb, and in the post-Cold War period, we're having the population bomb re-emerging as a threat. Now we're fearing these Third World peoples. Does this mean that you promote Norplant like a weapon in the war against population growth? Colleagues and I have looked through declassified documents and have found, much to our horror, that at the highest levels of government, this has been an obsession. There is a national security memorandum, for example, which talked about the great need to control population growth in places like Brazil and the big countries, and how this population was a definite national security threat. Narrator, Norplant is at least an officially approved contraceptive, but there are other, less regulated methods already in use. BETSY-HARTMANN. It's not just in the United States case the government, but there are also a whole range of private foundations that are funding the building of a population control movement. Narrator. One private organization is run by 2 doctors from America's southern states who believe they've found the answer for Third World women in a drug called quinacrine. Dr. Stephen Mumford. Quinacrine is the most important development in contraception since the birth control pill. It has an enormous potential for preventing births, and we're talking about literally billions of births. Dr. ELTONKESSEL. We have trials of the quinacrine method going in some 17 countries like India, China, Bangladesh, and the trials are going very well. 100,000 women have had this method without a single fatality being reported. Narrator. Dr. Elton Kessel was the founding director of Family Health International. He now researches quinacrine in a worldwide operation, masterminded from Dr. Mumford's basement in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Quinacrine is inserted into the top of the womb, where it causes inflammation and scarring in the fallopian tube, in theory blocking the tube with scar tissue and preventing the sperm from reaching the egg. Stephen Mumford. It's a very simple procedure, takes only a few minutes. It can be done in very primitive settings by people who do not necessarily have a lot of clinical skills. Quinacrine is clearly the cheapest method available in the world, and in fact the second cheapest method would probably be more than 100 times as expensive as the quinacrine method. For $10,000 worth of quinacrine pellets, 70,000 women can be sterilized. Interviewer, is that a lot of women? Stephen Mumford. That's a lot of women and a lot of grateful women. Dr. Amy Pollock. The story of quinacrine is very unusual. It amazes many people that, despite the fact that this drug has not been approved by any major regulatory body for use in women, it's been used and distributed to over, 80,000, maybe 100,000 women around the world who have been told that it's a safe and effective method and therefore agreed to use the method. How's it been done? Just a couple of guys out there running around with suitcases full of the drug who distribute the drug to doctors, primarily. And there's an appeal because it's inexpensive and it's easy to use. Narrator, but some scientists believe the drug could put women's lives at risk, from cancer and ectopic pregnancy, and they question this entire approach to sterilization. Prof. SHREEMULAY. This method of producing scar tissue is extremely barbaric. To try to damage the tissue so that you produce inflammation and block the tubes that way, I think, is extremely crude. It is imprecise for sure because one does not know where exactly that is going to take place, and it causes a tremendous amount of pain because of the inflammation. There has been a long history of chemical sterilization research, and this history is really an ugly one, and it's quite a shocking one because all kinds of agents have been used, sulfuric acid, formaldehyde, all of these agents which actually burn the tissue and cause production of scar tissue. Chemical sterilization was first tried out by the Nazis in their very first experiments in the death camps. That it has been picked up in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, and been promoted as rescue for the women of the Third World, I think, is quite extraordinary. Stephen Mumford. We're seeing 500,000 women die per year. Every day women die because of unwanted fertility that could be treated with this method. Interviewer, and you're going to save them. Stephen Mumford. I'm not going to save them. They're going to save themselves by electing this if the thing is made available, if the method is made available. We know these women want this method. Amy Pollock. What kills women in childbirth is horrible obstetrical services, totally inadequate services that exist around the world. Not only are they bad services, but they're services provided for women who want to have children, and those women are not going to choose sterilization. So women who don't choose sterilization and choose to get pregnant are not going to be saved by quinacrine. The numbers that are presented to us don't take that into account at all. Narrator. The World Health Organization has stated that no further quinacrine research in women is justified until further laboratory tests have been completed. Amy Pollock. We don't have answers to critical questions about the long-term impact of quinacrine on women, and until we have those answers, and we can find those answers, we should not be using this drug in women, period. Narrator. So who is funding the research? BETSY, HARTMANN. A student of mine was examining who was funding the anti-immigration movement in the United States and searching through the tax records of various foundations, when she chanced upon the tax records of the Leland Fikes Foundation and found to her amazement that that foundation was not only funding the Federation for American Immigration Reform, which is very anti-immigrant, but Mumford's work on quinacrine. It's very scary that you have a private foundation funding both an anti-immigration group and a form of unethical contraception. I think there's a racial fear involved in this politics. Stephen Mumford. My God, they call this an anti-immigrant organization. I think that the Federation of American Immigration Reform is a highly patriotic institution. That is correct. I mean, very few Americans agree that we should have open borders, and FAIR's position is that we should not have open borders, and that has been the focus of their efforts since they were created. I'm very happy to identify with the Federation for American Immigration Reform. ELTONKESSEL. You know, if you open the borders of the United States will become a developing country. Stephen Mumford. That's correct. Most Americans do not want to live in these conditions, including myself. Narrator. They've had sympathizers for their philosophy in high places. Stephen Mumford. I've just completed a book, and George Bush was just leaving the directorship of the CIA at that time. George Bush read the synopsis again, which said overpopulation is a graver threat to U.S. security than the nuclear threat. George Bush says I agree with everything you're saying here in this synopsis, and I can assure you that the people at the CIA agree with you too. So at that point, I knew that at the highest levels of our government, this issue was being discussed. Narrator. The latest scientific research promises the ultimate in easy-to-use and safe contraception. Contraceptive vaccines are being developed. In the future, one jab may prevent reproduction for years. It offers great hope, but how could it be used, and by whom? In the Philippines, women believe they have been tested with a contraceptive vaccine, secretly. Sister Mary Pilarvzosa. I first got suspicious of the vaccination program by the way it was being carried out. The government would announce 1 or 2 days a year, which they called National Immunization Days. They made announcements that only women of reproductive age, that is from 14 to 45-year-old, should come to the health centers for their tetanus immunization shots. Narrator. Records show 2/3 of tetanus deaths in the Philippines are amongst men, so why would they target the women? She was even more suspicious when she discovered the jabs were to be given 5 times in 3 years, when usually a tetanus is given much less frequently. Mary Pilarvzosa. That really put a lot of questions in our minds. The Department of Health would send their teams into the schools. They would just tell the teacher in charge that this was a government program. It's a service being given. It's good for the girls. Narrator. Then she started to hear disturbing reports from women when she was working in the slums. Mary Pilarvzosa. The women would say, why is it that the tetanus shots that we've been getting have had effects on us? Our fertility cycles are all fouled up. Some of the women among us have had bleedings and miscarriages. Some have lost their bobbies at a very early stage. The symptoms could come soon after their tetanus vaccination, some the following day, others within a week's time. For those who were pregnant on their first 3 or 4 months, the miscarriage was really frightening. Narrator, there are several research programs around the world testing the contraceptive vaccine linked to tetanus, which creates an immune response. The vaccine contains beta-HCG, part of a hormone necessary for pregnancy. This beta-HCG stimulates antibodies so that if a woman's egg becomes fertilized, her own natural HCG will be destroyed and pregnancy will not occur. Mary Pilar-Verzosa. I began to suspect that here in the Philippines, that's exactly what's happening. They have laced the tetanus toxoid vials with the beta-HCG. The only way I could make sure that they hadn't done that was to examine the vials, and how to get a hold of those vials was going to be a problem. Who was I to collect them from the health centers? Narrator, Sister Mary was helped through the Catholic network. A friend who worked in a health clinic removed the vials unnoticed. The nuns packed them with ice and sent them to an independent laboratory. Mary Pilar-Verzosa. Oh boy, that was really something when this came out of my fax machine. Report on HCG concentration in vaccine vials. 3 out of those 4 vials registered positive for HCG, so my suspicions are affirmed that here in our country, they are not only giving plain tetanus toxoid vaccination to our women, they are also giving anti-fertility. Narrator, Sister Mary was not alone. Many women and doctors reported similar findings. Dr. Vilma Gonzaga became suspicious when she had 2 miscarriages, both times after receiving the tetanus jab. She is now suing the government since tests showed she had very high levels of antibodies to beta-HCG. Dr. Vilma Gonzaga subtitled, Women should have been told that the injection would cause miscarriage, and in the end, infertility. The Department of Health should have asked beforehand, so that only those who didn't want to have children had the injection. I really hope and pray to God that I will still have a baby and get a normal pregnancy. And I am still hoping that the Department of Health will find an antidote to the antibodies in my body. Narrator, but the government has denied any contamination of the tetanus vials, and their tests have led to different conclusions. Dr. Raymundo, we found insignificant traces of what the machine read us HCG, and I interpreted this as plain background noise. In other words, anything could have caused that signal which caused the machine to read it thus HCG. So I think the notion of tetanus toxoid being laced with HCG to cause abortions is plain hogwash. Narrator, medical practitioners in Manila do not accept this and have called for further investigations. Dr. Reynaldo Echavez, we in the Philippine Medical Association doesn't believe in what the government is saying. The tests that were made in both big medical centers were all positive for HCG, beta-HCG, and they claim that this is insignificant. To me, this could not be insignificant because it can produce anti-HCG. At the moment, there is a presence of HCG in the vaccine. It can produce anti-HCG, and this can now neutralize the HCG that a woman will produce during pregnancy and abortion will set in. Narrator, so are the fears genuine? Or does this fit a Catholic campaign to discredit the population program? While the science remains unresolved, fewer women are accepting any vaccinations, and this could damage public health. If the claims are true, how could it have been done? Dr. Fays Schrater, if there is a conspiracy to immunize the women of the Philippines with chorionic gonadotropin rather than tetanus, then it requires the knowledge of some member of a government, or 2. It requires the participation of a manufacturer to link the chorionic gonadotropin physically to the tetanus toxoid. You can't just throw it in the vial and expect it to do its work. And it requires that it be mislabeled, and that it be shipped then to a center who knows what's in it and who is going to distribute it in a guise of tetanus vaccine. Of course it's plausible, and in fact it's probably not all that complicated. All it takes is money and desire and the willingness to lie. We have this long history, we as women, of been either lied to or coerced in terms of contraception. We've been lied to in terms of either the dosage of hormones like in the pill. We've been lied to about the effects of Norplant. We have had Norplant coercively used and then refusal to remove it. Women have been forced into sterilization camps. There's a long history of medical science being used negatively on women's bodies and of women being lied to. FARIDA AKHTER. We are for family planning, but this is not happening. External agencies, the government, the international aid agencies, they decide what method we should have, how many children we should have, and then they decide even what kind of contraceptive we should have. And then they dump on us all the rejected ones, new ones they test on our bodies, and women have no control over it. Narrator, every year 13 million children under 5 die, 500,000 women die in pregnancy, there are 50 million abortions worldwide. The need for family planning and new contraceptives is overwhelming. Amy Pollack, if we fail to recognize the human rights of women in developing countries in terms of testing contraceptives and using contraceptives, then we will lose all of the methods around. Women will deny themselves family planning methods because they will consider it all of the time an experiment, and they will never trust the support that they're getting from outside of their own country. That's a risk that we take.